Okay. Okay, Rabbi Schreier, we are ready to start.
Okay,
Wherever you are. Let's
no problem. I'm here.
okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Are there
Take it
any
away.
people? I don't see any other people. Are there?
So we're here. We have two people here in the Bismadrash,
Yeah.
some of the Kaili Youngalite, and we have some participants who have they're not on the screen, but they're
They're here. Okay. No
they're
problem.
listening in on the list without video.
No problem.
We got them
Fine.
here.
Go ahead, Rabbi. You want to?
So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Thank Rabbi Elef from the OU for putting this series together, and thank you, Rabbi Schreier, for his time. And just it's great that the OU has such an amazing service. Besides for providing us for endless opportunities and amounts of just kosher food that could be really just widely available anywhere in the United States and beyond, anywhere in the world really, but also giving this educational opportunity where we are able, people here in our community are able to learn about what goes sort of behind the scenes of the Kashrus world. So it's a great honor, it's a great privilege for us that we have this opportunity. And without further ado, Rabbi Schreier, take it away.
Good afternoon. I'm sure it's a couple degrees warmer by you than it is by us, but we're all inside right now, so hopefully we're all nice and warm. My name is Rabbi Dov Schreier. I take care of the restaurants and caterers, what we call food services in the OU. And we've adapted the title to be more modern thinking, to put it in the positive as opposed to going out to eat what could be the problem, more about the ABCs of eating out, of giving tips and some things we have to be concerned about and what we need to look for. And hopefully we'll together get some education. I'll make the presentation. If you have any questions, if you didn't understand something I said, please type in. If you have a question on what I said, let me try and finish the presentation, but I'm not running anywhere after we finish. So if you have more questions, I'm happy to listen and help, as often the questions are probably more valuable than the presentation. So we'll start. We call it the ABCs of eating out. I shared my screen, so you should be able to see along with me what we're doing. So let's start. So eating out could mean your ice cream shop, your restaurant, your coffee shop, your Shabbos Kiddush. I know in the New York area, especially on the way down to Lakewood, many of the gas stations on Route 9 or in the vicinity of Lakewood have cholent on Wednesday night, Thursday night. It's one of my rabbeim always like to joke that in the married home they say when they eat supper on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday Zumei Shabbos, and in Yeshiva Buffer's home he says on Wednesday night eats cholent Zula Shabbos, Thursday Zula Shabbos. And it's not only at our Shabbos table, not only raiding the cholent on Friday night, but it's whatchamacallit, it's all the time meal. But anyway, let's go forward with our presentation. So we start with some of the questions that we're going to look into. Okay. We start with the first issue is bishul akum, right? Food cooked by a non-Jew. Right? When we have this type of situation, Chazal were concerned about intermarriage, so we have to be concerned about the bishul akum. So one of the first condition that Chazal put into play that will mitigate the concern of food cooked is if the food is eaten raw. So I have an apple, a pepper, corn, which ostensibly some people will eat raw, and our hearts of palm might be eaten raw. So if a non-Jew cooked my apple, right, my apple is still okay. However, if it's eino nechal chai, right, our eggs, potatoes, right, our meat, and then the fourth column of a picture of fish, right, the advent of sushi has brought the question into a much greater focus, where people eat sashimi, raw fish, and as much as we, at least in the New York area, no store is allowed to exist without sushi. not sure what exists, in other parts of the world. But even the supermarkets have a sushi counter here. So it's very popular. But at the same time, even within, and my brother in New York has a sushi place also. But the even with the popularity of sushi, I'm not sure how many people are actually eating raw fish by itself that would turn over the halacha to be that if you can eat, if a non-Jew cooked raw fish, that it's may not be an issue, or just something interesting for a conversation. Then the second condition is that it's ein olel shulchan alachin. If it's not served by a king's table, then right, it will not be a concern of bishul achim. So certain examples, potato chips, it's not assuming, that as most poskim do, but there are machmirim, but most poskim assume that what the king eats is not his breakfast, but rather the state dinner at a fancy meal. Right? He's not eating potato chips, he's not eating cereal. Cheese will not be a concern because cheese, the milk is pasteurized before it's made into cheese, so it's already and it's edible raw. And canned vegetables generally is assumed not to be something that is served. They don't use fresh ingredients in the king's table. One other.
Wait a minute, Rabbi Schreier, let me just mute.
Yep.
Yeah.
One other concern associated with bishul achim, right? Also, the opposite is olel shulchan alachim. So one of the challenges, even if you get past the fish on your sushi, you still got the rice. The rice is also served on a state dinner, and it's a very popular food. Right, the potatoes, right, eggs. If you have a bris of some sort, you're at a bris and they have an egg station. They want to make fresh eggs. Right? You have to make sure that the mashgiach's turning on the fire, and especially when you're in Florida, it'll be a bigger concern because they probably have pretty good air conditioning in whatever room you're in. And if you're having these portable burners, right, the mashgiach someone has to be attuned that the fire on those burners doesn't get blown out by the air conditioning. And you have to have the mashgiach be very on top of it, or have a shomer Shabbos person turning on the fire by the eggs. Right, and obviously your steak, your meat is going to be a concern. But the other concern is who's the one turning on the fire, right? Is it my chef, right, the fire, or is it my domestic help? So this is something that could be a concern both in a restaurant or anyone who has any domestic help in the house, right? We for many years when my children were younger, we had a live-in. My wife was working, and the first thing we said to a person who we interviewed is you're not allowed to cook. Right? There's no such thing as cooking. You have cold for breakfast, you have cold for lunch. Only hot is when my wife is home. And Baruch Hashem, for many years, I had one of my brothers work not far from my house, and when we hired a new live-in, his job was for the first month or two to pop in at different times during the day to create the mirsas, the concern that someone might pop in, that they can't just have free reign in the kitchen. All right, so our question is, who turned on the fire? Right, if my chef on the left turned on the fire, then I have a problem. If my mashgiach or my wife or my children turn on the fire, then we're okay. Next, the next concern is the segregation of meat and fish. And in a Fleshika restaurant, right, the Shulchan Aruch writes that there's some health concerns involved in eating meat and fish together. So this doesn't only go to actually eating meat and fish. It also means separate utensils in some ways, and separate knives. So these present themselves in certain questions. Someone might be able to pronounce this better than me in this Worcestershire sauce or whatever, however you pronounce it. But that sauce has a fish component in it. Now, this specific one, the Leah and Parent, actually has an OU fish on the label. You might see other ones that have an OU on the label, even though it has a fish component. The OU is of the opinion, even though it's a machlokas, that if the amount of fish in the bottle is less than shishim, is less than 1/60th, then the concern of the sakana that might be there, even though we normally we'll say chamira sakanta meisura, matters of sakana are more concerned sometimes than isur, that when it's only when it's less than 1/60th, the OU takes a position that we allow it. So in a meat restaurant, we generally will not allow this OU fish sauce in, just in case it might end up being put on sauce. So you have to be aware. But this presents itself in many other ways. For example, you're going to a fleishika restaurant and you want to order fish and chips, fish and French fries. Am I allowed to order the French fries with the fish? The answer is it will depend on how the French fries are made. Is the oil that used for the French fries exclusively pareve, that they don't put any meat in, any fleishiks in it, or is it the same oil that they're grilling the schnitzel or the meat or whatever that they're frying, that they're using the same oil? So that presents it another way. I'm not sure how often you hear the question, but we do get this question from time to time. In a deli, can I serve a tuna pastrami sandwich? So the answer we generally give is you can serve tuna on one plate, you can serve pastrami on another plate. It doesn't trafe up the kalim, but it's still not, we're not allowed to put it together at the same time. And just to take it a step further, if you have a situation, you're invited to a wedding, you come to a, and the waiters are bringing out your food, right? They can't be using the same tongs to dish out the meat and the fish and the side dishes, because that your side dishes will then become meaty because you're using the same tongs. So what usually happens is they'll have a separate table in the kitchen where they're plating all the fish dishes with a separate pan of side dishes, and thereby avoiding the concern of the fish and meat together. The next concern is, what's called shiluach al yedei akum. What's called shiluach al yedei akum means that the food is delivered by a non-Jew with a subcomponent, what we call basar shenesalam min ayin, which is a more colloquial term, that food is delivered, the meat is erased from the eye. So one example is refrigerators with meat, poultry, fish, or cheese have to have some form of security, whether it's the owner's shomer Shabbos, whether it's a mashgiach of some sort. Right? When you go to a takeout, if you have a takeout place, right? If at night, the refrigeration is good enough that they can leave it in there, but it has to be, if there's any meat in it, it has to be locked, right? It has to be sealed. So generally, either they'll find a way to lock it, or they'll take all that stuff back to the first picture, to the walk-in, and lock it in over there. Outgoing deliveries, right? How if you're sitting in your office and you have a restaurant and they're delivering, how is the delivery supposed to be sealed to be sure that you're allowed to eat it, that it didn't get switched from another fancy restaurant, that the prices are much cheaper from the non-kosher restaurant, and you can make more money, so you have to be concerned about that. Right, protecting the integrity and the kashrus of the food. The next question is probably the most popular question in the OU system. We have a rabbi who answers the Kashrus hotline on a daily basis, who gets around 500 questions a week. 250 of those questions are related to Oreos, whether they're dairy equipment or not. Another 125 are dairy equipment or dairy, and the other 125 are miscellaneous questions. So there's not barnat, which, for those learning Yordea, no sintam, bar no sintam, that it's not, there's no dairy in it, but it's the keli, the oven that it was made in is meat or fleishik. This presents itself. So this presents itself with our Oreos, right? Which ones, and the OU has an extensive list on their website of which ones are actually dairy equipment. There's no dairy in them, but they're not 100% parv. The Haagen-Dazs sorbets, although they're labeled OUD, for many, many years, I'm in the OU approaching 24 years. For the many years I was, first 20 plus years I was in the OU would not give a DE designation. They felt that the people are not educated or well versed in what it exactly means, and if a person makes a mistake and it's labeled D and they don't use it, if they assume DE means parv, which for many Sephardim that might be the case, but for Ashkenazim it's not, DE means parv, then you can have a problem, because if you cook something and it's dairy equipment, then you're not allowed to use it. So but if you're making it as a dessert, right, you're having it after the meal, and all the lumdus that you want to take with it, right, that might be okay. So the OU generally doesn't, but for the past many years, the OU has put together a private, I emphasize private because these things can change very quickly, a master list where the rabbi who answers the hotline has this, has access to this list if you're interested. And he tells anyone who calls, make sure to check back every few months, because many of these companies that have items that are labeled OUD and are actually dairy equipment the reason that they're labeled D is because they have milk or some milk derivative in the plant, and they don't want to shut down for 24 hours and kosher and clean. They said we'll make it one after the other. Okay, it's OUB, fine, no problem. Right? There are different gradations of what that means, so you have to be very careful. So, right? Can these be eaten with meat or dairy? Right? What about fish? Right? That's our French fry question, which we discussed with has many hats. So the French fries can come in through the dairy door, through the meat door, right? It's a very popular question. I went to the Fleischike restaurant and I ordered French fries. Do I have to wait 6 hours, or do I, or is it it's not Fleisch?
Rabbi Schreier, can I just interrupt with one question, if possible? So, you mentioned, for example, when, like for the fish, the Worcestershire sauce, that in case that it doesn't have shishim, then the OU doesn't put on a fish label on them.
Right.
So these like Oreos or Haagen-Dazs or these stuff, they have more than shishim of the I think there's definitely less than shishim over there. Right?
The Oreos and the Haagen-Dazs have zero there.
Right, zero there.
Their only issue is the kalim.
Right. So why is it at all an issue of having let's say even eating them with meat if they weren't The
Shulchan Aruch writes that the minhag of Ashkenazim, the Ramah writes the minhag of Ashkenazim is if it's a tavshil bishul keli that they made basa on it, we don't eat it with milk.
Doesn't the factory clean out all of the machinery before they do a different run? Meaning, if they have something with milk,
right?
Do something without milk,
they'll have to be down for 24 hours before they to kosher before they went to parv, and the company's not interested in being down for 24 hours for kosher.
I'm saying they didn't clean it out with hot water.
What?
Cold water doesn't always, for my own dishes, in my sink, cold water doesn't really clean very well. So I assume that the factories use hot water when they clean, so it actually gets the stuff off. So wouldn't that?
But once it's entered into the utensil, it needs a koshering. Hot water that they're using in a even in a sink in a restaurant is not koshering temperature. So the utensil remains as a fleishik or milk or dairy utensil, even if you washed it with hot water.
Okay, and one more question, maybe.
No problem.
Maybe this is a whole on its own topic. One item I did notice that specifically says DE is bread.
Right.
Right. So
that was an ever evolving situation, which I think has solved itself, which it's no longer labeled DE.
Oh, really? But I mean, because there really we had this question was so assuming the reason it was labeled DE specifically is because there is a halacha that one should not make milk like bread, period, because they may eat it with milk. So then the question was, what does the DE help? If you're allowed to eat it with meat, you're allowed to eat it with meat, then you shouldn't label it DE. And I think then why is it not an Xera?
Right. So I think in that situation was that they were using dairy in other breads, but not more than, or maybe in some of the breads it may have been more than shishim, but the bread that they were certifying, they were not using any dairy in, but it was on dairy kalim. So that was why they were allowing them to label it DE. It wasn't violating the Xera, but it wasn't actually part.
Even though if you would think like the svar of the Xera, it should be anything that you can't eat with meat, but the Xera was on milk like mamish, not on not barnat.
Right, very quick. Correct.
Okay, shakaya.
Okay, now we move on to probably one of the more popular questions because it comes up, the next thing is talking about chalav shkedim. The Shulchan Aruch writes if you have almond milk that you're putting in your you have to put almonds on the table, right? Because of marasayin. One shouldn't think that it's it's actual milk, right? So this presents itself in a number of different scenarios. One is you have a fancy steak dinner that they're serving. He was he's serving at a fancy steak dinner. They're serving coffee, right? And now they want to serve, parva milk, right? So if you look at the first picture, you see the first one is our coffee rich is actually parv. We make our fancy caterers especially when they're in non-kosher venues where milk is easily accessible, right? We make them use the portion controlled creamers, the one on the left that actually says parv, OU parv on it, which is your observance of your chol shkedin. But then we have three other permutations of this conversation. The coffee-made creamers are actually have an OUD on them, and they have an ingredient in there called sodium caseinate, which is a derivative of milk. And in some of these coffee mates, you have to be careful. The amount is more than shishim, and so it's actually milk. Rav Belsky Zatzal had a major, at least in terms of those fleisha folks around who would like to have their coffee mate instead of their parva milk, which is next to it. Rav Belsky had this on many of those coffee mate creamers. It says in the ingredient panel contains less than 2% of, and one of those items on the less than 2% of is the sodium caseinate. So Belsky felt that if you put that coffee mate, that creamer into your cup of coffee, most certainly the milk component is going to be batel in the coffee. And Rav Belsky felt that it was not a concern of being mevatel iser l'chatchila, because you're not being mevatel iser. The concept of waiting 6 hours between meat and milk is only a minhag, it's not an iser, and therefore he felt that you're not being mevatel an iser. You're just stretching the concept of the being able to have that after an hour after. I don't think he would say that you can have it at the same meal right after. I think he said, an hour later you want to have a coffee, you can put that into the milk, but into your coffee. But that's because it's less than 2%, and the amount that's going to go into your cup of coffee, even if you're using a small cup, the amount of milk is going to be less than shishim. So he felt he could do that. The silk soy milk is actually OUD. We have to be careful with those because many people want to use soy milk in cooking. My wife has a kugel that she uses soy milk in as a recipe also, and therefore we won't allow our restaurants to carry soy milk that's an OUD or any other D because that's dairy equipment. We can't have that where it's compatible to be used both in the bakery part of the restaurant or in the the food part of the restaurant.
So even though it's totally dairy free, and it says no dairy, anything like that, so it's dairy kalim?
Right. The same as the Oreos. It's made out of that's dairy and is not whatchamacallit. And is not, they don't kasher in between to make it par.
And will we not say the same svara of, like the similar svara that Rav Belsky said about the coffee creamer, that that it's bottle? Let's say if I'm using this as an ingredient, right. if I'm let's say maybe not for a restaurant because we don't know how many amounts they're using, but if I would be making a kugel, let's say you mentioned a kugel, and even if let's say I'm serving it with fleishiks, and putting this soy milk, that would we not say that the amount of milk that's in there would be bottled already?
I hear the question. We know that the soy milk is made on dairy equipment. That is to use that lechatchila. The minhag is not to do.
Right.
What's it called? Right. So the almond breeze is actually parv. So you can use it. So there are alternatives, and there are some that are actually parv. That it's better to use the parv one in the in that situation. The next, right? If served by a meat meal, do we require the actual container? Now we're going to go into a different part of the of food service. Is the Shabbos Kiddush. Some concerns, or many of these concerns will happen if you're a guest by someone's house on Shabbos also, right? If you don't have a Kiddush, but these are some of the concerns. So, for example, right, dry, fully cooked food, right? Are they, if someone's serving you meatballs and sauce on Shabbos day, right? You want to ask a question: how exactly are you serving this congealed liquid on Shabbos day? Was it in before Shabbos? Was it not? Right. So our caterers, we provide 3 different options for heating food. One is, on top of this big pot on the bottom is a GI pot. On top of the blech, on top of the pot, you put the sheet pan over, and then you start lifting. We allow a non-adjustable hot plate that doesn't get too hot, right? Or in the third picture, the shelf above the stove, right? Yeah, every Rav, every Rosh Chodesh, gives you your guidelines of how you allow and what you allow to use for cooking. Additional concerns, right? Where are the challah and the baked goods from? Often the restaurant, the caterer makes chicken, the caterer makes kugel, the caterer makes side dishes. The caterer doesn't make challah, the caterer doesn't make cakes. And at least in the New York area, one of the cottage industries that exists is making these fancy cakes that people make in their own homes. And we have to, so even though you might see that the cakes or the little petit fours that you recognize, they come from the local supermarket that has a kosher bakery, but these fancy cakes are not coming from the same place, right? So you have to be aware of where it's coming from. All wine mevushal, right? We want to make sure that we don't have any issues with the wine after it gets open, right? We love all these foods. How are they heated, right? You have your stuffed cabbage. So whatever you have Friday night can be in the oven Friday night before. But what about Shabbos day, right? These are all questions, how these things are being hot. Instant tea and coffee. How do you serve tea on Shabbos? All right, different people have different, we generally try to have instant tea, maybe tea cents, but tea cents sometimes, if you don't make enough, you run out, right? And when you have, the caterer's guidebook says that when you have a Shabbos in a hotel, you need to cheshbon 7 cups of hot water per person. If you have, you take that number and go by 100, 200, 300, 400, as the numbers go up in the hotel, obviously pre-COVID, right? Right, but as the numbers go up, the amount of hot water you need, and to be able to have it all hot before Shabbos, and is not so simple, right? Then the sweetener, right? Are you allowed to open these packets on Shabbos, right? You have to know what the have a psak. You can one of the OU poskim took some of these sweetened loaves and was able to rip it without ripping any letters, and so he said so he told us we should write that loose powdered sweetened loaves should be made available for those who don't want to open packets on Shabbos, right? Implying that we allow it, but he should have it available if someone wants to be mocked. Right? Where's the hot water from? So if you have these standalone urns, right, so it's great. You have to have them plugged in strategic areas and to be where you need them. But on a Tuesday, right? You don't need standalone urns. You have this big 3-compartment urn that's connected to the water source, and every time you take out 1 cup or 5 cups or 6 cups, the more cold water goes in and heats it up. That's on Shabbos they call that bishul. Even though it's you're taking out water, it's a psikresha, but it's a psikresha is still usher. And Rebelsky Zatzal told always held that having the guy do it does not make it any better. Even though we have a general rule of psikresha by a guy might be mutter, he says here this is hainu kavanasa. This is his intention when he's doing it to make sure that there's hot water the whole Shabbos. So so you have to make sure you have enough hot water for Shabbos. Right? We say these questions come up again, making sure that if you're serving cholent and kugel at a kiddush and you have coffee, especially at least I know in Florida it may be hot here. It's supposed to be 30 degrees over Shabbos. So you may want to have a hot drink at a kiddush if a kiddush exists, which my shul hasn't had a kiddush in almost a year. So, right, don't squeeze the lemon. Right, we have a halacha, an interesting halacha that says, mashke aval sof ochel is ochel. So halachically, you're allowed to squeeze the lemon onto fish, or you can squeeze it onto sugar and then put it in your coffee. But you can't squeeze it into your cup of coffee, so right, or into your cup of tea. So he said, don't squeeze the lemon, right? And then, am I allowed to cut the birthday cake? Right? So the when you come to some bakeries at least in the New York area, when you ask to write happy birthday on it, they put it on a cookie on Tuesday, not even on Shabbos. But they're already alerted not to write write any letters or words on the cake. Right? But there's something you have to be aware of for Shabbos. Next, now we have what to ask about a restaurant that sounds intelligent. Right, so there's some, you're going on vacation, halavai, right? And you're going to another area, and you're not sure what you're supposed to do, right? So the easiest thing is to look for a reputable hashgacha, and the rabbi tells you that this hashgacha is good, and you say you generally don't have to ask any questions. But if you're traveling to more exotic places and you haven't heard, and you see that this has a tooth in the window, but your rabbi is not sure if it's okay. Right, what are some of the questions you ask? Right, so who has keys to the store? Right? If the store is owned by a Shomer Shabbos person or not, or who has keys to the gas? If a non-Jew has a key to the store, but if the gas is locked at night, then he can't do any cooking. Right, then that might be a different situation. Right, who has keys to the refrigerators? Right, we have a concept of basar shenesalim and ayin, basar, cheese. Right, we want to be sure that we're protecting the integrity of our items. Who's watching the cleaning crew? Often, they may have a Shomer Shabbos person there and a mashgiach in the restaurant all day, but if they're hopefully keeping their place clean, right, who's taking care of that, at night? Right? Is there someone there who's watching? So one of the things we talk about is you lock the gas and they have no way of cooking, and you put a plug lock for the microwave or any electrical equipment that they can't do any cooking, so you're a step ahead of a situation. All right, what's the procedure for checking vegetables? We have concerns. The government lowered the tolerance level of how much they spray in vegetables, which inversely elevated the amount of protein in our vegetables. The protein is in quotes. If anyone doesn't understand, they can refer to the manual of what protein means by vegetables. So we have to have a procedure in place, right? What's the procedure for monitoring the fires in the ovens? Is there a mashgiach? Are the pilot lights? Right? Many of the modern day convection ovens, when you open the convection oven, the fire goes off, and within a few minutes will go down below sheer temperature of bishul, and the non-Jew closes it, and that bishul in that oven is now his bishul. So you got to be careful. How should I expect my food delivery to arrive? Right? Is it going to be taped properly? What happens? You had a long day and you order from the restaurant and it comes and it's not sealed. Rabbi, help! Right? What do I do? Right? So you want to know how you're supposed to expect it, and there are many different ways we can salvage it, whether it's with the receipt, whether other ways to salvage it. But you have to have a system in place that's correct. Right. Who is responsible for checking for Kashrus of all the products? You see in the supermarket, the guy with the hard hat is the one checking my Snyder's pretzels or my whatever that's coming in, whether it has a hefsher. If that's who we're trusting, we're not. Right. That's why when you go into a supermarket, you have to check every label, because sometimes you can get a potato chips or cheese curls that the other products that the company sells are kosher, but the cheese curls are not. So you got to be careful. And they say, oh, this product, this is a kosher certified brand, but maybe it's not. Maybe not everything they sell is kosher. What products are they mafresh challah? Right? They have a bakery. So people say, oh, mafresh challah. You have to separate challah from challah. You have to separate challah from cake and cookies. Also, it's not only from the challah and the bread. Right? We come back to our favorite topic of separating meat and fish. Right? It's relevant in our restaurants as well. Right, checking the eggs. So you might ask what the middle picture is doing there. Just not just for color purposes, but it actually is for color purposes. The minhag is that when you crack eggs, you check the eggs for blood spots. One of the systems that we've used effectively in many of our places is an incentive system for the non-Jewish staff when they're cracking the eggs. So we tell them the picture on the left has a clear bowl, right? A clear bowl that you're checking. The that you're checking so the mashgiach or the shomer Shabbos can monitor the process. You can look underneath and see if he's actually doing it. The second one is we give him an incentive of a couple dollars if he finds blood spots. You want to make sure that he doesn't have any red nail polish in his pocket to pad his pockets. Right, so that's what my nail polish is doing in my presentation. And then you have your eggs, how they come out. Next, finally, your wedding in a hotel, whether it's local or you're going out of town, and it's something to know that any hotel that's doing a kosher event also has non-kosher going on, whether it's at the same time. In some hotels, it's in the same kitchen within feet of each other. You need to really be vigilant in what's going on. Right? Check all the waiters' equipment. Often the waiters, the staff in the hotel is the staff of the hotel, not the staff of the caterer. And therefore, they know where all the nooks and crannies and where they hide equipment is. You have to really know where everything is and be sure that the caterer's kalim are marked properly. Make sure that all the knives come from the caterer. Right? The effectiveness of a chef is how sharp his knife is, especially on this. Right? Make sure knives are from the caterer, especially on the carving station. If they're serving, roast beef, and they're, every slice he gets if he gets an extra 5 slices from every roast beef because he has his knife sharpened properly, right? When he's serving hundreds of people, that can exponentially save the caterer a lot of money. So you may be inclined to try and get a different knife for the chef, so we can be better attuned. Right? Who's turning on the fires on the smorgasbord? Much of the food, 95% of the food on the smorgasbord is already cooked. So if the non-Jew turns on the fire, it's not the end of the world. We have a concept of ein bishul achar bishul, but there are, we mentioned the eggs by a bris or crepes and there are certain items that are made to order at a smorgasbord that you have to be aware of that the mashgiach is turning on, right? And what often happens is after they heat up the food in the oven, they'll put it in a hot box to stay warm. But there are some things that might be able to be cooked. They'll put the gelled sternos in there. We once had a situation where Mashgiach was planning an event for 1,500 people with the caterer, and the chef of the caterer asked who lights all the sternos, or those gel fires that in these hot boxes. So that the hot boxes is the thing on the right, the bottom right. So when you're serving 1,500 people, you're talking about 40 of those. I'm talking about 40 of those. That's and each one has 3 or 4 sternos. You're talking about 160 sternos being lit. I didn't mashgiach without batting an eyelash said to the chef, "You are," right? Because almost everything going in there is and probably everything going in there is already cooked. I'd rather if one doesn't get lit, don't blame me. It's your fault. It's not my. And the mashgiach has to triage. If you have 100 people, the mashgiach should light all the fires. If you're having 1,500 people, you have to figure out. We have more than one mashgiach. More people. You need the manpower just to be able to serve it. Next, we can't get away from our separating meat and fish. Right, making sure all margarine is parv. Right, butter is milchik, margarine is parv. You have to be sure, especially caterer does milchik inflation. Then when we send the margarine, you got to be very, very, very certain that the margarine is actually parv and it's not butter. Right, who are the waiters and chefs at the event? Right, is it a shomer Shabbos chef? Is it a non-Jew? The waiters are wearing the uniform of the hotel, right? So you have to be aware of that in observing the hashgacha. Who is supplying the alcohol and the drinks, right? In a bar in a non-kosher venue, it's the venue is providing the bar, and they kosher special name. I'm sure in Jacksonville doesn't even register on the Richter scale at all, right? But even in New York, as much as we think we're doing so many events, and we make a difference in that situation, it's still not a significant minority. So you have to be aware and be careful because there are a lot of things we don't allow them to serve. Small things like ocean spray cranberry juice. The OU as a policy doesn't accept. Right. So most hotels that's the go-to cranberry juice that they're serving. So the caterer has to bring his own bottle. So we want to make sure the caterer every bottle costs money, and he has to the bar is being paid for by the Baal Simcha. The Baal Simcha is paying the hotel for anything on the bar. The caterer has to bring it, to replace it, so that's coming out of his pocket. He can't bill the customer for for bottles of it. And if you're serving 5, 6, 7, 8, every little bit adds up in the conversation. The other thing you have to be aware of is event planners. I don't mean to insult anybody, but in this wonderful state of Florida, I was once speaking on a panel with another rabbi from Florida, who was involved in Kashrus in Florida, where he had a situation where the party planner had bought certain cakes, and they were not able to trace it back to where he said it had come from, and therefore they weren't going to let him use it. To which point the event planner called the police on the mashgiach, or I had the Baal Simcha call the police on the mashgiach on Shabbos, mind you. So the event planner is not high on the Purim list for hashgachas or for caterers. So be wary. All right. So now just before I conclude, as I said earlier, we'll leave some time for questions. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. You want to chat it, put it in the chat box. You want to speak it, however you want, and we can try to figure out the. Is there a chat box? No. So if anyone has any questions, you can get to the rabbi.
Back here, right? So we have some of the people here, and here in the Bismillah, we have some people who would have to ask their questions. But we're gonna let Rabbi Schreier finish the presentation now, or you like just to ask the questions now?
No, I don't ask the questions now.
Okay.
Hi, Rabbi. So I just was wondering, putting on a barbecue fish and flesh, but let's say they clean it. Is that a problem in events if they do that? They're at home even?
So at home, if it's clean, it's fine. But it has to be really clean. And at an event, it's just impossible. They're doing so much at the same time. You can't do it at the same time. You can have separate grills. You can put what many caterers do. They have grill pans for fish. They put it on the fire, but they have a grill pan that they'll use in that way. Someone asked why would they make almond soy dairy when it's usually made for people who don't want or are allergic to dairy. So what halacha considers dairy and what the USDA or what the government considers dairy are two different things. If they don't kasher the kalim in between, they only heat it out at a lower temperature than kashering, it'll still be considered dairy equipment in halacha. So therefore, it's going to be labeled D.
You mentioned several times in the presentation that for Sephardim, DE would not be a problem if it was dairy equipment, it would not be a problem for cooking with meat afterwards. Right. Can you elaborate on that for the Sephardim in the audience?
So as far as I understand, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that they, the best example I give is by my Oreo cookies. Oreo cookies, I as an Ashkenazi can have it for Shabbos party, or I can have it for dessert by my Shabbos meal, but I can't make my chicken with the Oreos. Right? We keep ourselves a step removed. Right? Once we've finished with the meat, we can have that which is dairy equipment. For Sephardim, they hold that's mamish considered part.
And the rabbi also mentioned Haagen-Dazs as part.
Haagen-Dazs sorbets and the Haagen-Dazs non-dairy, not par, the dairy equipment. You're Sephardi, so that would be considered par. The ones that don't have any cream in them.
It's not right. So it's not halostam.
Okay, so just before we end,
someone else put in. You mentioned placing almonds on the table if using almond milk in cereal. No, almond milk in meat, inflation, not in the cereal. What about using vegetarian cheese on a hamburger? How is this permissible? So generally, on every menu where anyone's using parva cream cheese or parva soy milk, parva cheese of any sort, we have them either put the word imitation or put the word cheese in quotes in some way, indicating that it's not actually milk. Mm-hmm. So let me do the last couple of lines. It's not a right. Know the questions to ask. Don't be afraid or ashamed to ask. Right? When you're invited to a simcha, call the caterer and ask the questions. Don't be afraid. You're the customer. You have every right to ask. All right? You're a Sephardi. you want to, right, for example, when it comes to Bishul Akum, a classic example, by Bishul Akum, the Ashkenazim hold, the Ramah holds that just turning on the fire is enough, whereas for the Sfardim, you need to actually have a hand in the cooking process. So what often happens when you order a steak in a restaurant, the mashgiach's turning on the fire, but he's not putting the steak on the grill. In some of the fanciest restaurants, the Sfardim come in and say, "Can you ask the rabbi to put this steak on the grill for me?" Right. So that would be an example of, you want to say, is there any food that I can eat at this wedding or at this simcha? Because unfortunately, at least at this point, most hashgachos are geared towards Ashkenazim, nothing personal against their Sephardi brethren.
How about French fries?
It is our responsibility to be aware of what we are putting in our mouth. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. We are very fortunate to have available so much kosher food. We need to demand high standards. And thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.
Okay. Shkoyach, Rabbi Schreier. We have some more questions over here.
If French fries requires Bishul Yisrael.
French fries requires Bishul Yisrael. Yes.
Second question is back to the dairy equipment. What are the different temperatures that the OU requires for factories, to kosher versus cleaning?
Rabbi Schreier, we're going to discuss that in 2 weeks. We're going to discuss all the factory things.
Shkoyach, Rabbi Ellis.
So I would say everyone should hold the questions about that. Also, in terms of just to qualify with Rabbi Schreier, homemade French fries they serve in a restaurant like Bishul Akum, the OU post can hold that regular French fries are not a problem Bishul Akum.
Thank you.
Okay, Shkoyach.
So therefore, that's how we can certify when you go to Winn-Dixie or Publix and you see all these French fries in the oven, in the freezer case. That's how you can purchase them.
Okay.
Right. The question was in a restaurant for
The chef might, in a lot of kosher restaurants, the chef will be Jewish, but the fry cooks will be goyim.
Right. So thank for Sfardim who are eating.
I don't know the answer to that question.
In a certified restaurant, they need to have the mashgiach put on the French fries. That's the question. Okay.
Okay.
Any more? Right. Okay. So the $1 million question is Starbucks.
Right.
Yeah, so Starbucks, not just.
Starbucks is unfortunately, as Starbucks grew, they went out of the coffee only business into the food business. And once they started with the food business, they also changed the way they make the dishwashers. The stuff is washed together. And now, especially in the world of in the green world we live in, that people use reusable cups, and right, those are all challenges to Kashrus. So they have these kiosk stores that are smaller, that everything's paper goods. Right? The kiosk stores are not selling food. Right, so for a Ben Torah, Rabbi Schechter and Belsky, right, or Schechter holds that a Ben Torah shouldn't go into these type of places because people think once you go in to buy coffee, they're going to buy other things that may not be so great. And so a person should try. When you're traveling, you don't have a choice. You should try to be going into a place that has that's doing everything. They're washing everything in place and not putting stuff in dishwashers at the same time, because they're sanitizing whatever they're using in Starbucks is not considered a davar piping that's going to make everything puggle in the dishwasher.
Right. Someone is asking about
plain Starbucks coffee. Plain Starbucks coffee is only certified. The flavor shots that they have, you have to check, but I think almost all of them have a hefsher. But the hot chocolates may be an issue. Some of the cream, some of those drinks where they make, where they have a lot of mixtures into them, you have to be very careful to be sure all the ingredients are okay.
Okay, so somebody is asking about like convenience stores, gas stations that have like the coffee urns. Could there be any issue like a 7-Eleven?
So the 7-Eleven coffees are actually certified. You have to know what the arrangement is in each place. There's no two places are the same, and you have to look. But plain coffee, plain black coffee. One of the issues that come up also is that today they want milk to be hot and steamed, and right, so you got to be careful with that. Or what are they steaming? Are they steaming only milk, or are they still steaming other eggs?
Yeah, Rabbi Cohn, we're going to discuss all these things in a couple of weeks.
Gewaldic. Okay.
So hold those questions.
Thank you, Elif, and thank you, Rabbi Schreier, for a great presentation. Very, very educational, and I really, really appreciate your time and appreciate everything the OU does just to make kosher food available for Jews throughout the world. And thank you, Rabbi Elif, for coordinating this program, and Rabbi Schreier for your time, and for everyone else for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Shukayach.